So today we're going to talk about Heart of Darkness by the Polish-English writer Joseph Conrad. Heart of Darkness was first published in 1899 and it is a novella depicting a voyage into the heart of Africa. But as usual, before I go into the book itself, I'd like to talk about its author, Joseph Conrad, and also the background of this novella. I think that out of all the writers whose work I've reviewed so far on this channel, Joseph Conrad is the one who has the most fascinating life of them all. And not only that, but he used the materials that his life had provided him with in his novels. And Heart of Darkness is no exception to that. So let's talk about Joseph Conrad. He was born, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, Józef Theodor Konrad Korzeniowski in 1857 in what is now Ukraine, but it was then part of the Russian Empire. He was ethnically Polish. Polish was his first and his mother tongue, but he also grew up speaking Russian. Joseph Conrad only became fluent in English in his 20s and then became one of the most celebrated English writers of all time. His family belonged to the Polish nobility in the Russian Empire, so Conrad had a privileged upbringing. Conrad's family was involved, however, in the cause of independence from the Russian Empire, so they moved around a lot during his childhood. Both his parents died of tuberculosis within a couple of years of each other, so Conrad was sent to live with his aunt. And then, when he was 17, he traveled to the south of France, where he started his career as a merchant marine. A few years later, Conrad began to work on British ships. When he was 21, he first arrived in England, and he barely spoke any English then. But he had already traveled to the Belgian Congo, where he made many of the observations that made their way into his novella Heart of Darkness. But I wanted to talk about Conrad as a polyglot. His mother tongue, as I said, was Polish, and he definitely read in Polish, we know that, but I'm more interested in the languages that he learned as an adult. First, he learned French, and apparently he even wrote in French, although he never published. And then he learned English, and he learned it so well as to become one of the best English writers of all time. I just cannot highlight how remarkable that is, but also I don't think I need to, right? I think everyone could see that. Now, after retiring from his marine career in the 1890s, Conrad became a writer. So reading Conrad's prose, whether in Heart of Darkness or any of his other fiction, can be quite an experience. Why? First of all, his English is strange, highly literary, but strange, and that is not surprising given that he only learned it properly in his 20s. And likely, he must have learned English mostly by reading, I think. But his style became so influential, mostly to American writers of the next generation or two who also like to experiment with language and style. And I am talking here about the likes of William Faulkner or Thomas Pynchon, among many others. So I think Conrad has increasingly become a more acclaimed writer with time, which happens sometimes. You know, sometimes it goes the other way. I mean, he was recognized as a good writer during his lifetime. He died in 1924, but his reputation as a great writer has continued to grow after his death. Okay, let's now go into his book, Heart of Darkness. Now, the narrator of the book is Christopher Marlowe, and we can consider Marlowe an alter ego of Joseph Conrad. So in the book, Marlowe tells a story to a bunch of sailors on board a ship. Something that allegedly happened and to which he was a witness. So Marlowe had worked for the Belgian Empire, and he seems to have, at least at some point, believed that European colonization and empire building were essentially good. Essentially civilizing forces. But the reality that Marlowe confronts when he gets to Central Africa is vastly different from what he expected. What Marlowe sees in the Belgian colony in Africa is economic exploitation and the mistreatment of the native population. Marlowe's descriptions of the colonial horrors, things like seeing people beaten to death, for example, are based on Conrad's real-life experience in Africa. And this allows him to go into detail in those descriptions. Now, Marlowe's initial impression changes later when he hears about an ivory trader and colonial commander of a trading post known simply as Kurtz, whom the native people in the colony see as a demigod. So finally, Marlowe finds someone in which he can see that force for civilization that he sought. Well, he actually spends part of the novella actually looking for Kurtz. Now, although Heart of Darkness is held as high literature, it has some elements of the adventure novel that were extremely popular at the time, mostly I would say in terms of plot. And I guess now some readers might enjoy those elements, although I would also expect readers now to be more horrified by the European colonizing project in Africa than perhaps the first readers of Heart of Darkness were. But focusing on the style, which I think is the best thing about the book, I think we can see the influence of Impressionism in the prose. So the novel is quite atmospheric. Things often happen suddenly. There's fog everywhere. You know, it's all very impressionistic. But also, because of that, it is strange and foreign. So strange, in fact, that it can be hard for the reader to understand exactly what is going on. I know I've read Heart of Darkness several times, and I still get lost in some parts. So if you're looking for a plot-driven adventure book, you're going to be disappointed, and most likely also confused. Heart of Darkness is a slow burn. There's a profusion of detailed descriptions that slow the narrative down, and it is not an easy book. Heart of Darkness must be one of the most difficult pieces of fiction writing I have ever read. But why is Heart of Darkness then so critically acclaimed now? I think it's mostly down to those descriptions, which are both incredibly detailed and highly literary in the beauty and exuberance of the language Conrad uses. Now, I don't think Heart of Darkness works so well as an adventure novel because of its impressionism and slow narrative. Now, one of the best things about Heart of Darkness to me is its ending. And it is a shame that so many people are hung up about spoilers because I would love to discuss the ending here, but I won't. Don't worry, I won't discuss it. You'll have to read the book to find out how it ends, and I think that's the best way to find out anyway. But I do think that the ending is great. I think it's one of the best endings in English literature, and that's all I'll say about it. There can be several post-colonial readings of Heart of Darkness. When I studied English at college, Heart of Darkness was part of the syllabus, and I imagine it continues to be, but I don't know. And famously, the Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe called Heart of Darkness an, quote, offensive and deplorable book, end of quote. Why? Because of its portrayal of Africans and how he saw that. I don't know if I'd agree with that, but what I do know is that I think Heart of Darkness is worth being read and studied. I definitely think that. And that can be done in several different ways, but definitely not as an unproblematic adventure novel, right? I think Heart of Darkness is a reflection of how the European colonization or exploitation project in Africa was seen at the time it was taking place. Of course, there was no civilizing project. All there was pure commercial exploitation. And that, coupled with its literary qualities, I think are what make the book worth reading. But of course, this is just my opinion. Now I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Juan, and I do post a new book review every Saturday. The best way for you not to miss any of my reviews would be to subscribe and turn on the notifications bell. This is all from me for now. I hope that you are all doing very well, and I hope to see you again very soon for another book review. Bye for now.